All right, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the Office of Library Services in this sort of inaugural session of the Alma Q&A monthly webinar series that we're starting. Just a bit of housekeeping, as I said in the email. Please do not accept other calls while in this meeting, because you will be placing us on hold essentially, and your hold music will play, which is very disruptive. And I think I also will just recommend that you put yourself on mute so that until you have a question, because sometimes phones ring and people walk into your office. So it'd be helpful if we could just have a quiet atmosphere so we can share what we need to share. And I think with that, I'll hand things off to my colleagues, Kevin, Nancy, Greg, Roland, Kathy. We're all on the call today, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. You can ask questions just by asking them, or if you would prefer, you can use the chat box. I'll be checking there in the Zoom chat box for your questions as well. And I'm also at the moment sharing the implementation libguide that I mentioned in the reminder email that I sent out on Wednesday. And hopefully you can all see that. And we'll be making references to it and another libguide throughout this presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. Kevin, do you want to introduce us to Alma and what it does, and provide a brief sort of implementation plan, perhaps?
Well, the brief description about Alma is that it does everything that Aleph does, plus it also incorporates other systems as well, like SFX and some of what we do in 360. It's really the soup to nuts management of the electronic resource, from the time of selection and initial licensing all the way through to enabling it and putting it out to the patron to use. That's the big difference. And there's also, of course, greater automation, improved reporting, improvements in many different areas. So it not only does what Aleph does, it just does it better. It's, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Okay. And Nancy, do you want to talk a little bit about the procurement process and where we are and how that's all going?
Sure. Some of you know already that we do have a countersigned agreement signed by both Ex Libris and CUNY, and it's gone to the state. The state now, the chatter there. The state now has to sign off on it, and we are cautiously optimistic that it's the countersigned agreement pretty much means we can now talk to the vendor, whereas before we were in, the famous CUNY procurement cone of silence. So actually, do you want to show in the libguide the timeline that we have proposed? Sure.
So the libguide, as I said, it was in the email that I sent. You can also follow along if you wish on guides.cuny.edu/LSP implementation. And so we're going to the timeline. I'll just zoom in a little bit.
Now, it's important to remember that this timeline is something that's going to change and evolve over time. These guides that we have are going to be updated. We want to keep things as transparent as possible. So even though we're only showing a small number of events that are coming up in 2019 and 2020, it's going to this information is going to expand. Once we have an actual signed contract from the vendor, or then a signed contract from the state, we're able to go to the vendor and get a firm commitment on dates. And at that point, we will get there will be developed a more comprehensive plan with specific dates for all of these different events that are going to happen over the coming year. When you want to go live on a new system, the vendor, of course, has to have staff and resources available. They have to convert your data. They have to provide you with a certain level of service. They have to have their own staff ready to go. So it's not just a matter of us picking a date. It's also a matter of what the vendor has in terms of availability so that they can properly support us in a way that's useful. So once we pick a date, we settle the date on a date with the vendor, they know the milestones that lead up to going live. If you're going to go live on the first week of July, then you know what you need to have done by the beginning of June and so forth. And being able to, and walking back through the timeline, the vendor is able to predict what targets we need to meet. And that's how we'll fill out that timeline. You know, of course, if we need to start our training by January, but we can start it by November, we're gonna obviously try to start it a little earlier to give ourselves more time. But this is where people will find out what that timeline is as these things evolve.
Okay. But we are looking at a July 2020 go live. So starting in July 2020, we will be using Alma instead of Aleph and instead of Serial Solution 360 and all of the other systems that we've been using.
That's definitely our goal. If the vendor says, you know what, we can do this, but it's gonna need to be August, then it could get pushed. You know, we're not gonna agree to pushing it into the semester, obviously. But, you know, we may need some flexibility in terms of when we go and when we start. So an example would be with SUNY. SUNY is going live on July 10. That's their date. Across SUNY, they're all going to go live. In order to accomplish that, some of the libraries had to stop working in Aleph in June, and a few of the libraries had to stop doing their work at the end of May. It's part of what they need. Now they're a different system and they're a little more complex on the technical implementation. So we certainly won't face those same problems. But you know, there's until we have it in writing, there's always this ambiguity.
Okay. But we've been preparing for this Alma migration for years now. We've been cleaning up our data in Aleph to help with the transition so that once we do get the contract, we can sort of hit the ground running.
Well, right. You don't want to be cleaning up and at the same time trying to learn a new system. The idea is to separate them out a little bit more, do the cleanup, and then be able to focus more on the training in the later phases of this transition.
And on the timeline on the implementation guide page, we have also a recommended timeline for the Aleph optimization projects that have been ongoing. So for those who are involved in some of these, you'll see it on this page, as well as the separate guide we have for the cleanup projects that, as I said, are ongoing.
That would be good to pull up if we could pull that up on the screen.
Yep, it's up there.
Oh, okay. So you can see that on the left-hand side, we've enhanced or improved on the recommended timeline to make it more clear. It's something that's going to change. We've added to it a tab for OCLC reclamation. That's useful to look at. Because it's going to affect a variety of areas in the library. And even there, we don't have everybody scheduled because not every library is ready. So rather than press people with some artificial time frame, we're trying to tailor the scheduling to the needs of the individual library. And you know, it's better we take the time to let them be ready than rush it through.
Yeah. And so in addition to all the cleanup we've been doing, we have also put into place a sort of organizational structure for the implementation. We have two committees, the Communications Committee and the Steering Committee for the implementation project. The Communications Committee is going to become a standing committee. It will replace the current Primary Contacts Committee. And this is the committee that is responsible for working with the Steering Committee and making sure that communication about the planning and implementation of the LSP of Alma is distributed to everyone who needs to know. And there is representation from each campus on this committee. The Steering Committee and the working groups that are task specific that report to the Steering Committee are not representative. We kept these groups smaller so that we can get the work done. But you can take a look at all of the rosters if you want to know who is on it. There are mailing lists that everyone who is on these working groups is a part of so they can discuss these things. The minutes from these groups are also shared on this LibGuide for each respective group. There is a page called Communication Channels, and this is where you can find out how to sort of stay in touch if you're not on a working group to see what's going on. So in addition to the minutes that will be made available after every working group meeting and committee meeting, there are two blogs to follow. The implementation blog, which is where we'll share information specific to the implementation of Alma, and then the general sort of blog at OLS that we've been keeping for several years now. We'll have some more general information there. We're also encouraging everyone who's not already on QLibs to join it, because that's where we will be sharing information about the implementation. We had considered having a separate list, but that just seemed onerous, and the Communications Committee voted against that. And there's also the Alma discussion list from the vendor Ex Libris, if you wanted to join that. There is also at the bottom of the navigation a page for documentation and other resources where you can start getting to know Alma by using the existing documentation that's available. We will be creating CUNY specific documentation as the implementation unfolds. But as we're in this sort of limbo period before we get started, if you're curious, you can start to look at what's available on this documentation and resources page.
Also, while you have it on the screen, I'll point out,
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go back and scroll down. So right here on the center of the screen, stop right there, you see this Alma search engine. So when you're first starting out, if you're confused about something and you're trying to figure something out, that's a nice way that's a nice search through a variety of documentation places on a specific issue. Some of it may not be relevant to what you're looking for, but you can probably find information about most things through that search. It'll be more useful, I suppose, later on when somebody's trying to learn a specific task or wondering about how a specific thing works.
Yeah, and can I also point out the libguide will also be used by the committees to keep all their minutes in there. So far, the steering committee and the communications committees have both met, and the
Data Migration Task Force.
Yes, and the steering committee also had a meeting with the working group chairs, and so the minutes of those meetings are already posted. Actually, I'm sorry, not the last meeting with chairs. They haven't been posted yet, but they're coming. So you can go in and get a sense of what's already been discussed. And also, just so you know, for those of you who are on some of the working groups, the chairs have been tasked with convening their first meeting by before October. So if you haven't already heard from your committee chair, your working group chair, you will be hearing from them shortly.
Okay, and just last, I want to point out the FAQ that we have as sort of a brief introduction to the implementation project, what it means, how this will affect things. So hopefully this will help answer some of the questions that you may have. But unless there's anything else my colleagues in OLS want to add, I think we'll open it up to questions from the public. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to speak up now.
Hello,
Yes.
this is Rhonda Johnson from Hostos, and you know we've been trying to do the work. Excuse me. We've been trying to do the work that's been requested. Alycia, Tappeneier and I, and recently in my area, which is access services, we've really been doing some smaller projects to try to partially kind of read, but also partially try to rectify things. So, for example, we have books that, for example, have a patron barcode instead of an item barcode. Or we have been finding that we have items that don't have a barcode. And there's little things like that. Is that going to disrupt or be a problem for you all? We're thinking of doing these things with the idea of helping to clean up everything before we move to Alma.
I would say quite the opposite of a problem. I'd say it's extremely helpful because it helps make sure that your catalog is just more accurate. You know, going into OCLC reclamation, it would be great if you have items that don't have barcodes. Maybe it turns out there's something wrong with the way they're cataloged. So fixing it means that when we update your holdings with OCLC, those items will now get included. Maybe they weren't included before.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So I would encourage anything that you can think of that's specific to your library, because we're probably not going to think of it. If it's special for your library in particular, I doubt we'll ever think of it.
Okay, thank you.
I just, excuse me, I just want to interject here and say that there's some ambient noise coming from someone. It sounds like someone may be eating. And again, this is just a reminder to please mute yourself unless you're speaking, because it's very disruptive. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you're having conversations outside of this call, also please mute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing I'd mention is that the idea is to have this type of a call once a month, and in the beginning we're not necessarily expecting many questions, but later on certainly people will have more things they wonder about. It could even be about other things. It could be about data cleanup in general or something else. But anything to do with the migration is fair game. Might be something we don't know yet because we haven't gotten to that point, but we'll let you know if.
Okay, I have a question in the chat. The Council of Chief Librarians was asked to share this information with campus administrators. What exactly are we to share? Greg, if you're on the call, I think that might be something you can help address. So, Greg's voice. I think it's just in general the fact that we're in a major transition period right now, and that we may need some additional resources. And just again, the scope and the nature of this project, which is going to be huge. This will affect everyone, and the administrators need to be made aware of this. Kevin, do you have something to add?
I also wanted to add that we're going to be developing, or perhaps we've already developed, an elevator talk and giving that to the different chiefs so that they have some talking points to use about Alma with their campus administration, because it's also there is a real need for more staff to take on these types of projects. So those are the kinds of things that certainly will help.
Well, and actually at the steering committee, we discussed this, and it wasn't so, well, I mean, certainly if you're understaffed, that is something you want to talk to your administration about, but really there's just the idea that to let them know just the scope of this project and how big it is, so that if you do lose staff sometime during the duration of this, that, you know, a line can't go empty for a year. You know, I mean, that the administrators really have to understand just how large this project is and how disruptive having, you know, being understaffed at this time.
Well, and also the timing. It's not the time to let the line sit open for 6 months to save a few dollars. It's a crucial time.
Another question that was asked by Rhonda Johnson: is there a final date that the CUNY Plus catalog will be eliminated?
That's something that's going to be decided most likely it's going to be decided in the public services, unless the Council of Chiefs come up with a ruling on that. It's most likely going to be decided in the Public Services Committee. Certainly when we turn Aleph off, that means we're turning off that old Aleph OPAC or CUNY Plus or whatever other name, CUNY Classic, whatever name you want to call it. But we haven't set a date. I know that when Harvard migrated, originally they were talking about, let's shut it off before we move over. There was opposition to it. They kept it up and running to the last minute. And then after they were live on Alma with Primo as the front end, Primo is OneSearch, they were still getting complaints from people saying, well, where's our classic catalog? You know, where's the Aleph OPAC? So it's a tricky thing to navigate. Exactly when's the best time to cut it off.
But
certainly,
Kevin, if I understand correctly, there is a time when it has to, that by the contract, Aleph will get turned off. Was it a month after Alma goes up, or?
Yeah, I think both systems can run parallel for 30 days. And then that's it. So I guess the final date, the absolute final date for QLibs would be 30 days after the Alma implementation. The go live date.
And even then, you know, the other factor to take into account is once we pull our data out of Aleph for the last time, before the cutover, we'll pull the data out of Aleph. We'll have to stop data entry. That means we'll have to stop people from being able to submit clicks requests through Classic Catalog. So it may be up for search purposes for a little while longer beyond that, but really a few weeks before we go live, that's when people are going to stop being able to use it as a fully functional search interface, you know, and submit requests and make changes to their accounts and renew books. That will all end. And I think also, even if we decided to, for some reason, keep Aleph running for more than 30 days, we certainly can't leave the OPAC, the Aleph OPAC up and running. That's open to the world. That's open to the public. And that's a clear indication to the vendor that we're not following through with our agreement. So we certainly couldn't leave that open and up.
Kevin, this is Greg. I just want to, right, the system will come down in a matter of weeks, and no more than a month, and the OPAC along with it. I mean, it's just
Right.
It's
That's right.
There's no, that's that. We'll be in a new system. I did want to comment though on a prior question. We have briefed the chiefs and given them language to share with their administration about the scope and complexity of this project, and about A, retaining lines, B, filling lines that are unfilled, or B, hiring new lines during the course of the project. So that language is pretty substantial, and that was relayed to the chiefs in the last CCL meeting.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Rhonda. Is there a place where we can go to see Alma in use, perhaps at another institution? And I think that's a question.
We are going to be able to see it in October when we have an Alma Day, where we invite people in from all over CUNY. We're going to bring Ex Libris in to show us the product. You get to see it in action. You'll get to see it being used. And then in November, we're going to have a huge kickoff. And again, you'll have the chance to see Alma in action, and as training then begins. There are conferences around that also would give that an opportunity for that. But I mean, you can even look in the documentation. Some of that so-called documentation turns out to actually be videos that have screenshots. I would caution you to keep in mind that Alma changes and screens will change. So it might be, some of that might be a little older. And 2019 is a year for huge change to the metadata editor, so say the cataloging module, if you will. So we can certainly expect that that's going to change by the time we get to it in the fall and next summer.
Right, and again, because this is a back-end platform, it's hard to see it in action because what you're trying to see is how people do the work that they're doing. It's not the public interface. The public interface for Alma, there was the OPAC CUNY catalog for Aleph. That will no longer be the case. Alma does not come with its own public-facing interface. That is what Primo is for. So Primo will become the public interface for how users will find local resources. And that will be the only way they can search for library resources. But as Kevin mentioned, there are the documentation on the Ex Libris Knowledge Center, which is on the LibGuide, which includes videos and training material, which again, as Kevin said, may become outdated. So we caution you to, when you're looking at it, just look at the big picture rather than the minor details of the links and what it all looks like. And we will have an event in October where the vendor will come and do a demo for us.
Now, the other thing I would tell you is that if you go back to that data optimization guide and you go to the physical to electronic conversion tab, I don't know if you have the
Peony?
Yeah. And you notice there's a link. And I'm not saying that anybody necessarily has to watch it, but if you were to click on the link and watch it as it goes through its paces, at certain points it starts to show you Alma screens. So we don't necessarily have to watch that now, but you could see that here's a video, tells you exactly how long it lasts, it explains what exactly it is, and then you'd step through the video. It's something that maybe acquisitions or electronic resource librarian would love to see, but
right. And again, I'm just showing the documentation and other resources page on the implementation guide so that again you can have a place to get started.
Now the Harvard implementation of Alma documentation is also very useful for somebody who's curious or wants to see more.
We're not going to go through it now, but
No, I mean, it's the kind of thing you can do this at home, but you can do this on your own. But certainly, for these other links, these will certainly give you some kind of a peek.
And Kevin, this Alma search engine link is not any kind of guide to, what is this?
Click on it, and we'll show it. It's not that fancy. It shows you these are the 3 sites that it searches. It searches all of the documentation. It searches the developers network, which is useful. And what would I use it for? Well, for example, I can use an API to load invoices into Alma from that I got from the vendor. That's something a campus library might decide to develop on their own. That's part of this whole project, is giving campuses greater autonomy, greater ability to do things. You want to run reports on your own, schedule them on your own.
So this will just help you find documentation. So if you do reports.
That's really all it does.
Okay. Thank you. That was also one of the questions. Okay, another question was, beyond the elevator pitch, will there be a fact sheet available for non-librarians?
Well, there is something on our OLS support site. And we probably should bring that documentation over here into the guide. I was thinking about that, but yeah, systems, library service platform. Go ahead. There is some documentation here. For example, the ILS to LSP migration. That might be, somebody might find that useful. Well, you can look through there yourself. There are a few different bits of information there. But it depends on what type of information you're looking for, whether it's really answering the questions you're wondering about. But if you have not seen this yet, I would encourage you to go through and look through it so that you're aware of what's there.
Actually, I think maybe we should move that to the libguide.
Yeah, I was saying, I think we should.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because at some point we're going to need to develop some type of a more permanent, ongoing support site for the Alma, but that's a work in progress.
Okay. Next question. Can you talk about what training for each library and the support staff will look like? Will it be on-site?
Well, there most certainly will be on-site training, but as far as the schedule and what that's going to look like, we do have a working group, a training working group that's going to be working on that, coming up with, just how we're going to do all the training. So,
I mean, there's going to be a mix of strategies, and Nancy's absolutely right. Until that working group gets together and formulates a plan, they're not a rubber stamp. They're an actual working committee, and they're going to have a big say in how the training evolves. But we're going to use a variety of. Some people learn better by getting into the test system and playing around in it and working around in it. Some people will learn by watching the videos. And for other people, I mean, certainly we've had one thing that we found it was useful in the past when we were learning a new course reserves module in Aleph, was to have a meeting in a central location and then invite in multiple campuses to come in and discuss what they've been looking at, what strategies they've been trying, ask questions. So those types of open meetings or roundtable type meetings are another part of the training strategy. But it really begins in October, November. There's plenty of time for the training because then you still have all the way till July to start to learn it.
This is Kathy. I also like to encourage everyone to send your suggestions, comments to the training committee. What kind of training you would like to receive from the community, and then we can put that into the training working group's agenda, and then try to formulate a workable plan for the community.
Right, and I just put up, sorry, I put up the training working group page so you can see, potentially maybe contact the chair of that group if there's anything you want to share, any training requests you have. Okay, then the next question. Do you have the dates for the Alma information sessions in October and November? Will they be in a central place or on every campus?
Let's go back to the timeline. I'll write on that guide. This is as much as we know as of at this point in time. Obviously, we will, once we have a firm commitment, from the state, we can then get a firm commitment from the vendor. Once we get a firm commitment from the vendor for dates, we'll be posting it here. We'll also be talking to the communication committee to get the information out to the campuses.
But we are expecting a central location for the
Yes.
demo day.
Yes. Yes. It's
And
not.
we're also planning on, I think, trying to stream it. We'll work with the vendor to see what we can do about that.
Yes.
Okay, I have another question. Do you all happen to know if most libraries implement Alma before Primo or vice versa? How were our timelines chosen?
Many libraries are coming from a different. There are many libraries, or a number of libraries, that are coming from a different system, like they were on Millennium or they were on something else, some other product, and so now maybe they were on Symphony. So now when they come up in Alma, they're coming up with Alma and Primo at the same time. The SUNYs had something else. They were using IDS, not IDS search. They were using other discovery tools. So for them, Primo was new. So Primo and Alma came up pretty much at the same time for them. With CUNY, we have the advantage that we already have OneSearch. We already have Primo live, and the Public Services Committee has been working on it, improving it for several years already. So for us, it's the back end, the back office that's going to be new.
Given the timeline, i.e. a July 2020 live date, how much of a disruption do you anticipate given summer courses and library personnel leave and vacations?
Well, I mean, we can't really anticipate, but we did choose July for the very reason that it's not smack in the middle of, most of the campus's semester. We thought that would be much more disruptive. So we're going with a midsummer live date.
And also for the acquisition side of the house, it's other libraries that have migrated have found it much better to finish your fiscal year, close out Aleph, pull your data over. There's a 2 or 3 week time period where the data is being converted and prepared and transformed into Alma format. And then you come up live in Alma, start afresh with a new fiscal year, start fresh, and then ideally in the middle of summer, so that you have several weeks to prepare before this fall semester starts. And some of the preparation that we're doing ahead of time, one of the things we're doing is to try to prepare things in our training environment for Alma. For example, we're going to bring the course reserves from the training environment in Alma into our production environment in Alma. And what that does is it gives libraries 6 months to prepare their course reserves, as opposed to just trying to put it together in a couple of weeks.
Hi, this is Greg. I'd like to comment as well. We really don't have a choice about when we could come up. And that's true that July is kind of a fallow month for the colleges, and that's exactly why we have to do it then. But, we have a year to sort of plan our scheduling. This is a once-in-a-decade occurrence. So there will be special considerations given what we're up against. So your chiefs are aware of the timeline, and like us as well. Many of us do take off during July. We're just going to have to make do and potentially just, again, make next year an exception. There's just really no two ways about it. I also wanted to comment on training. One of the things that the vendor will do or our overall strategy will be to train the trainers. So the vendor will work with us to train a sort of advanced cadre of trainers internally, and as Kevin and Nancy and Ali have alluded to, we'll formulate a plan as time goes on. But one of the things that we negotiated in our contract was a very substantial amount of on-site time for the vendors to get our trainers as prepared as they need to be. And that's it for me.
The other thing I would mention is that in the various committee meetings, we've already started to talk about or teach some of the Alma. We may not boggle your mind with Alma terminology that you haven't learned yet, but I use the example of looking at how you manage circulation policies based on a collection and what collection of materials are in. That's really an Alma concept, an Alma approach. And it's something we're trying to introduce now into our environment, just to reduce some of the learning curve. But why I notice when I'm listening to talks about Alma, sometimes I'm listening to workflows, and I'm realizing, wait a minute, that's what we do in Aleph. Not the same buttons being pushed, but the same concept, the same flow for the work. So some of it is going to be familiar. Some of it will be new.
I have another question to follow up on the question of training. How much training time for non-librarian staff is expected or has been needed by other schools? For example, do most staffers feel comfortable with an hour class and then a bit of one-on-one, or do they usually have to take a series of webinars or sessions?
My answer would be that there's two-part answer. The first part is, and I think it's very important that we have the training committee meet and start to plan the training. They're definitely going to be working on formulating a plan. So they may come up with something different than whatever I say today, and that's fine. That's what we want them to do. The second part is what one consortium did. What they talked about. Well, this is how we train to prepare our consortium. And if I had to do it over, this is what I would do differently. So I listened to what they told me, and then I went back to the person who led the CUNY implementation and asked them what they thought about that approach or that plan. And they thought that was a good idea. And it basically involved watching two introductory videos. You watch it, you get the sense of what's what. You then be able to log into the test environment because obviously you want to have hands-on experience to match the lecture that you see in the video. And then after that, you would focus the training on, since it's back office, but you basically want to separate out those that are, say, public-facing, like reference or circulation, and then from that, the technical services training, acquisitions and cataloging.
Well,
So,
and also, I was just going to say, I mean, part of our training from Ex Libris, because they've been through this sort of thing so many times, they've worked with so many large systems, they're certainly going to be advising us on how to handle the training of the staff. So we'll have a much better idea once we start, working more closely with them.
Thank you very much. That answers my question perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I don't have any more emails by chat. If anyone, I do have some by email from one of the campuses that I'll start with those. What role will staff and faculty not related to access services play in this new system regarding the handling of current research data management tools, since many of us have used CUNY Plus and then transitioned to OneSearch? It goes on to say, we need the continued support of administration and faculty to make this happen, but we also have to keep ourselves well versed in the advancements of data management so research doesn't become stale.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the question, what role will staff and faculty not related to access services play in this new system regarding the handling of current research data management tools, since many of us have used CUNY Plus and then transitioned to OneSearch?
Well, I would point, the first thing I'd point out is the fact that many times people will use CUNY first, or not CUNY first. They'll use the Aleph OPAC, because that's what they have access to use to do any kind of searching or reporting. What's going to change is with Alma Analytics is that campus libraries are going to be able to create their own reports and do their own analytics. So it's something more sophisticated than searching in the OPAC. So I think it'll lend itself as a better tool for scholarship.
And then another from the same person, question related to training that we've answered probably several times, but I just want to make sure that this is addressed. Who will these personnel be to execute and train library staff and faculty in technical services, access services, collection management, and electronic resources?
It'll be a mix of people. There'll be people from Ex Libris for some staff, as Greg mentioned before, the train the trainer approach. Some of it will be from OLS, and some of it will be campus librarians, because as I cite back that example, we had that new Aleph course reserve module. We brought in people from the campuses who started to use it. Let's talk about how you're using it. Let's talk about your ideas, and some interesting ways, some interesting ideas about how to manage specific parts of the course reserve came from campus librarians, people actually doing the work. So I think there's some value in having people actually get their hands on this new system, start working in it, trying out different strategies, and then seeing what works for for their library, and sharing that with other libraries. So these group meetings that we have, I think that'll be a pretty valuable part of the training, even though that's not a formalized course.
Okay, from that same email, next question. Will this system allow for seamless billings and payments with the business office, research foundations, and other CUNY entities responsible for internal and external funding that don't take long for processing and payment? Will this impact our current budget process, which involves bidding, creating records for new vendors?
That's a lot of question. I think it's initially it won't be interfacing with CUNY first. Is that what basically they're asking? Like if this is something that's going to impact CUNY's financial system? Because initially it's not going to interface with CUNY first, but I believe, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, that's something we're looking at down the road.
Well, we have a very specific list of integration points with CUNY first that we will delve into. I mean, CIS is aware of these, but until we actually formally start the project with them, we'll prioritize those. But if we can pull information from CUNY first into Alma, pulling from the system is much easier than writing to the system. So anyway, we have a very discrete list of integration points, and so we'll be, that will be in our implementation planning with CIS, which really hasn't formally begun yet. So, but we expect to have at least a nominal degree of interoperability with CUNY first as a part of our first phase. So in the 9 months between we get the system and it goes live, we'll see what we can do with CUNY First integration.
Okay. Last but not least from this email, what exactly is the cost and how does that cost compute with our library's current and future budget as our budget fluctuates each academic year in relation to other CUNY community colleges as well as senior college libraries?
Nancy, I can speak to this as well. Obviously, if we didn't have the money allocated internally, we couldn't buy the system. So, it's essentially a commitment to be able to fund indefinitely. It's a necessary enterprise system. So, it's that will never be in peril. Cost comparative to Aleph, it's more expensive, but it delivers a lot more, and also it's SaaS, so there is no internal cost of hosting servers and systems. Unfortunately, we can never really get that cost from CIS, so it's hard for us to really compare what is the savings. But nonetheless, for what we're getting,
But also
we're getting good value.
Yeah, and it's not really that much more when you compare all the components that it encompasses, because we're going to be able to cancel like our SFX subscription, the campuses. This year we're canceling our 360 Mark subscription. Next year, once it's live, the campuses are going to be able to cancel Serial Solutions 360 if they want to, because it'll have its own, Alma will generate its own A to Z list. So there's a lot of things it's replacing, and it's really not that big an increase. And I don't have the numbers with me, but it's really not that big an increase. And I think it's all paid for centrally. Oh, or except for the Aleph component. But yeah, it's not a huge increase when you take into consideration what we're replacing.
Okay, and then I had there's another question through the chat. I've heard that Alma is highly customizable. To what extent will each campus have local control of settings, etc.?
On the first round, it's going to be more generic, just because we'll all be new in using it, including campuses. But as we roll forward, certainly we can do more customization. Some of it's going to be a question of agreement between the libraries. For example, if libraries agree that people can do their own patron notices, then maybe things would move in that direction, but the committee may want some consistency across libraries for the patron notices, because Library A sends notices to patrons from Library B, and so some of that is not decided.
I can speak to that a little bit from the Open URL Resolver perspective. Right now, all activations of e-resources in the knowledge base have to go through me because we all share the same knowledge base. With Alma, the individual schools will have a lot more control over what they activate. So that's the answer from the SFX Open URL Resolver perspective.
The other thing to keep in mind about customization, with a product that's like Aleph, it's pretty static. You install it, it stays the same for 4 years until you do the next upgrade. With a product like Alma, there are some things that you can customize, but you have to make them backward compatible because there'll be releases over time and the product will change over time. So if it's going to be, so there's advantages to customizing, and then certain kinds of customization just create extra load to have to keep reintegrating it back into the the changes that are being released in the product.
I also like to add, this is Kathy, in terms of cataloging, because we don't have the new system yet, nobody has any hands-on experience, but what I can see is in the future, when we migrate, we will begin to build the best practices for all CUNY libraries at that time, and then we will have a better idea to what extent each campus have their own local settings. And then we will figure out at that time. We hope each campus can have their own local practice, and then also have the CUNY best practices in mind. A model that we will be building together.
Okay, thank you. We have 3 minutes left. I have one question left in the chat box. Is there an interlibrary loan module?
Iliad and Tapasa will continue, just as they have been before. The full details about ILL, we don't have the full answer for. But I know that people who use Iliad and Tapasa are content and happy. They continue to use it in Alma. So it's not, so when you say an ILL module, no, we're not going to be replacing those existing systems. Yes, they integrate well with Alma, and I'm not aware of any significant problems with it. But of course, we need to learn more about it. It's definitely an area that's going to require further investigation and discussion.
Hello?
Yes.
This is Rhonda. Last question I have, during the time we've had Aleph, one of the issues that I found to be difficult to handle over the years was the level of system support and the level of required systems knowledge, what to download to get, things to print, all of these kinds of things, having the IT of the college understand what the library systems needed. Some schools have a systems librarian, some schools have a lot more system support and so forth. Do you anticipate, or can the systems committee think about that? Is that something I could write a suggestion about? Because for the smaller libraries, it can be very difficult and time consuming.
Well, we definitely have that in our mind, because whatever solution we come up, for example, the systems working group is going to need to come up with a solution for printing and printing labels. And it's something that's going to need to be something that works for everybody, including libraries, because there are a number of them that just don't have system librarians and never will. So I think the answer is to come up with something that's going to work for everybody. And if somebody wants something more elaborate or special, they're going to have their system librarian develop that, or at least they'll have the opportunity if they're interested in doing that. But it would be for their own campus. So in other words, to give a specific example, we're probably going to use something like Spinomatic for printing labels. Now somebody might say, well, and Spinomatic works fine. It works fine with Windows 10. But somebody might say they don't like that. They want to try something else. Well, that's something that people will be able to do. So it'll be more a simple generic answer that'll work for everyone. And if you want something more elaborate, that's going to have to be developed separately. If that answers your question.
But Kevin, we will be sharing things that can be implemented sort of by others as well. And there's
Yes.
also the developer network where we can glean more information, some customizable things, and that can also be shared with your IT staff if you need the assistance. But the systems committee, there's a separate systems working group that will be working on the Alma implementation. But there is also a separate systems standing committee that we currently have. And so the two, I think, will have to work together to determine sort of the best way to go forward and where to share things and how to support each other.
That's correct. And an example of something that a librarian would develop, I use the example of patron checker. Everybody's seen it, not everybody uses it, but it would be basically a system librarian developed an API to do a specific set of tasks. They made it available to everyone. Those that want to use it can use it. Those that don't can disregard it. But the other reason I mention that is notice that it's something that's browser-based. It's fairly simple. There's not a lot of installation involved. There's not a lot of IT involvement that's required once the solution's been built. So I think that's part of what we're going to see in Alma over the first few years that we start living in an Alma world.
Thank you.
Okay, and it's 11:03, so our time is up. Thank you for joining us. This will be a monthly series where we'll be hosting sort of an office hours Q&A sessions. This session has been recorded. We will try to make this, I haven't done this before, so hopefully this will work out. And when it's all ready, I will share this with QLib so that you can share this with your colleagues at the campuses if this has been helpful at all. Okay, then I hope you have a nice rest of your day and a nice weekend.